Hello, welcome back to another episode of the 100k Freelancer Club Podcast, the show which helps you on your journey to becoming a high-earning freelancer. My name's Niall McCorn, and alongside me, as always, we've got Jacob Brickle. JB, how are you? Are you still sunburnt?
That is a very good question, and fortunately, I am not sunburnt. I've moved on to the peeling stage. Currently shedding my skin like a snake. But how you doing, mate?
It's not the first time you've been called a snake over the years, is it, to be fair? Anyway,
I agree with that.
Enough of the sly digs. As we often do here on the 100k Freelancer Club podcast, we love to feature guests. We love to hear from top earning freelancers, experts in their field, and that's exactly what we're going to do today because we've got a cracking guest lined up for you. Nick Kyriakides. He's a post-production artist, and if you've never heard of what that is before, then you're in the right place because he's going to explain all to us. Not only that, he's an award-winning freelancer who owns his own film company. He's worked with the likes of Adidas, Google, and Estee Lauder, some massive clients, and he's also one of the top freelancers on a platform called YunoJuno, one of the UK's premier freelance platforms and the largest marketplace for elite creatives and tech freelancers. Can't wait to talk to Nick, and he's joining us right now. How you doing, Nick?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on the podcast. Big fan of you guys. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're very good. I'm sure you are as well, because even though it's been a tough year or so for a lot of freelancers, things have been absolutely flying for you. I guess the first question is post-production artist. Explain it to us. How does it work?
Yeah, sure. Post-production being the digital side. So within post-production, you've got all these different subcategories. So one of them would be typically video editing. So a lot of people are really familiar with video editing now with, the likes of Instagram and TikTok and all these filters and ways of trimming your clips. Essentially, video editing is putting together all this footage and telling a story. So that's one of the main roles I cover. I'm also what's considered a visual effects artist. So that's anything from like adding in lightsabers or explosions to films and all these kind of cool lens flares and things like that. And I do a lot of kind of animation work and color grading. So color grading is where you just color films and make them maybe look more cinematic. Or if you've seen the film maybe 300 or Matrix, they've got very specific colors to them. So that's probably a good example of just showing what you can do if you push the colors and really work on the grade. So many roles, and it really is expanding over the years, and there's just a few of them that a post-production artist would typically cover.
So multiple skills involved in that. It's almost quite an umbrella term. So what was the kind of first skill you learned, or the first time you sat down at a computer? Because I guess you spend a lot of time in front of your laptop working away on it. What was the first sort of skill you learned, I guess, before we start the freelance journey? What was it that kind of turned you on to this line of work? What was it that gave you the bug, I suppose?
That's a good question. I think the gateway kind of skill that got me into this was video editing. And that was probably stemmed from me and my best mate used to make skateboarding videos when I was a kid. So I think it was like my 16th birthday, my parents bought me a digital camera, photo camera, that had this feature where you could film for 30 seconds at a time. So we had to kind of do some kind of skate tricks within that time limit and do like a big run. And I used to kind of take those videos and put special effects on them and edit them together in kind of free software that anyone can get, especially nowadays. And
I would love to get my hands on some of those clips. I bet they're incredible and embarrassing from back in the day. You have to send them in to us.
It's like you've seen them, Jacob. Yeah, one day they might show up on the dark web somewhere, but they definitely were the inspiration for just experimenting. Like, I used to be so excited going home and just cutting these videos together with like some kind of rock track and making it upbeat and adding just really irrelevant VFX that didn't make any sense, like an explosion when my mate landed a kickflip or something. But it was really cool. That really got me into it.
Are we talking like Windows Movie Maker sort of stuff here, Nick?
Yeah, there was Windows Movie Maker. There was one called ULead Video Studio and Pinnacle Video Studio. And then I kind of got into the harder stuff like Final Cut Pro 7, which is, I believe, what the BBC used.
So if we spin all the way back to the start of your freelance career, did you like leave university and come straight out of uni into a freelance role? Did you have a job, or did you, work your way into it, like on the podcast last week with Niall, where Niall's experience talks about he goes through some employment roles into some freelance roles at the same time and sort of juggles it. How did your freelance career actually start, and when was the first time you realized I am a freelancer?
Yeah, I done exactly that. I finished a BA at uni, which was a really mixed degree, which was covering kind of web design, film, animation, and photography. And I finished that course and I went straight into just applying for gigs online. So I wasn't really focused on getting a full-time job. I've never really had that personality to just work full-time on the same project or the same company. I guess I'm one of those people. I love variety, and I think a lot of freelancers want that autonomy and they want that kind of free life of just choosing when to work and for who to work with, and in different countries, and just have that kind of control over their life in that sense.
Was the idea of freelancing actually introduced to you at university? So I can imagine that you might have been working for some, fake clients or potential clients in your studies, and then did they develop into like paid side gigs whilst you were studying, or was it something that you saw other people, maybe peers or people older than you, freelancing, and you actually thought to yourself, I want to do that?
It's a good question. I'd be honest, I've never ever heard the term freelancing. I heard of like the term self-employment, and I think you guys actually mentioned that on the podcast in one of the episodes, where self-employed was thrown around, but I don't know about you guys, but I associated that more with like maybe a builder or a plumber or someone who's self-employed.
Yeah, 100%.
Whereas in the creative field, I never knew any freelancers myself. So I went home after getting my degree and I spent the whole summer working on a showreel of just kind of made up work because I had 0 clients in my bank. And I sent this showreel out to various kind of job sites, which were kind of putting job posts that they were saying they wanted a music video created and they wanted someone to just cut it together, or they wanted someone to do visual effects for a little commercial they were doing. And I actually went for my first role was actually for a music video to kind of do some color grading, which back then I was so new to everything. I just kind of went for every job going. And I got really close to the director. We had a really good kind of interview. And he said, look, there's a film competition this weekend. We both had to write this film in 48 hours, film it, and edited it that entire weekend. And I actually had food poisoning, and it was like such a hard weekend to just kind of edit while being sick.
What was the suspect meal then, Nick? You have to reveal that.
Oh, I can't remember what it was back then, but no, in my student days, probably pot noodle or something along those lines.
Food poisoning from a pot noodle.
Pot noodle and Red Bull. It's like a student's diet. And from that, we actually like won the film competition in the States, and we got through to the following round, and they gave us $500 to kind of just, obviously bank or to invest that into the next film. And we just started making films together, and I started freelancing with that director that I met, and we formed a company. And since then, I was just kind of a freelancer in that sense. I just registered as a freelancer once I got to the tax threshold.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that idea of, not knowing you're a freelancer, and think that it's interesting that it kind of arrives for different people at different moments, the penny dropping about being a freelancer. Is that what you would suggest then to maybe some younger freelancers, people who are in a similar position to what you've described, maybe fresh out of uni, that do have some uni experience or, educational experience under their belt, to just try and say yes to everything? Because I've always found that in my freelance career, saying yes to something and figuring out how to do it at a later date, at the very early embryonic stages of your freelance career, is a good way to go, because you can build up some good relationships with clients like what you've just described with your director there.
Oh, totally. You've literally hit the nail on the head with every interaction, not even business interaction, is all about relationships. And it's one of the things that you don't learn at uni. You don't really have a module on, this is how to build a great working relationship with someone, or this is how to communicate effectively, or, how to be likable, and all these kind of things that help you in life. And I think these are things that I would really encourage any of the listeners, if you're starting out, or even if you're quite a seasoned freelancer, just the best thing you could do is just build relationships with people. And it doesn't have to be transactional and think, oh, I'm only going to speak to this person because they might be able to get me a gig. It's just literally about being a good person. And I can't tell you the amount of times I've been referred by other people who aren't even in the creative industry. They've been like, a friend of a friend is a director, or they want, this commercial shot and they need someone editing it. It's all these connections really come from, and they stem from, key relationships.
We've spoken about how essential and how important it is, and I think networking plays a massive part in every freelancer's journey. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because being a nice person doesn't cost anything. It's a very, very small investment to make, and life can be stressful as a freelancer, but I'm absolutely with you there. Sometimes just being a genuinely decent person does pay its weight worth in gold in the end. So 11 plus years now as a freelancer, Nick. It's a long time, and you've still got the hunger and you've still got the desire for it. We've spoken about when the penny dropped that you were sort of officially, I guess, a freelancer. When did things really start gathering momentum? Because we'll come on to it in a sec about the use of digital platforms and freelancer platforms online to get your name out there and pick up clients. But when was it you really start to get some traction and realise that, yeah, this is a full-time thing for me now?
I think it's when I got a decent portfolio and a decent showreel that probably captured a lot more attention online, where, some of our videos, I'll give an example actually. One of the first major gigs I had was a big music video for a band called In This Moment. And I had to kind of invest a lot of my post-student money into to buying a computer just for that job, because it was such a heavy project, and we kind of used these what's called red cameras, which was brand new back in 2008. And off the back of that video and kind of learning so much and kind of experimenting with visual effects and a big name international brand, which was like world renowned, I think that kind of credibility of having these record labels on my CV and when I'm sending out and applying for jobs, and they're asking you, what have you worked on recently? And you're showing something that's quite reputable and actually quite well known, that kind of gained a lot of traction, and it snowballed from there, because I built so many more contacts off the back of that film set.
Yeah, I mean, some of the show reels that I've seen from you are absolutely unbelievable, but obviously the more experience you get, the better they get. Just quickly on that, do you think it's important for people when they're putting portfolios together and putting show reels together to have evidence of recent work? Because I know a lot of people that I've spoken to, particularly students that are coming through in my industry, the broadcast industry, that continue to push show reels and demos and portfolios of stuff they did a long time ago. And that's all well and good. But I think sometimes as well, you need to have evidence of recent work and showing what you've been up to in the more immediate term, I should say, because I think that shows that, you still got your finger on the pulse, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's certainly a balance, isn't it, of just showing new work that shows that you're evolving. You're a freelancer that is constantly, you're getting employed, and you're showing that by showcasing recent work, and also work that is maybe in different directions, work that you're maybe a bit more outside of your comfort zone, or just isn't work that you've just done over and over again. It's something that's a bit more innovative. So it's totally well and good keeping in existing work that are maybe a few years old, but it stands the test of time and showcases a certain aspect of you. I think it really comes down to your showreel and your portfolio is kind of exuding your personality, but also your skill set. So as long as each piece of work has significance and is in there for a reason, then it is worth staying in there.
What do you find difficult about the freelance life? Because we'll come on to it in a second about the amazing success you've had on platforms like YunoJuno and some of the amazing clients you've worked with like Adidas and Google et al. What do you find the most difficult thing about being a freelancer? Because people listen to these podcasts, and I imagine a lot of people that do are in the mindset of they love the idea of having a freelance lifestyle, being able to choose their own holidays, pick their own hours, work when they want, work with the clients they want, which all sounds great, but sometimes it isn't always as easy as that. So, kind of taking the great things out of this, what do you find some of the more difficult things when it comes to freelancing?
Yeah, I like the spin on this, just not talking about all the ups of being a freelancer. I like the aspect of, what else are things to look out for? I think it's two things. I think as a freelancer, one difficult thing is actually saying no to work. Because it gets quite addictive if you're quite successful on these platforms, or you have jobs lined up and you're getting kind of multiple offers from other people, it's quite easy to say yes to everything. And then what you find is you're a one-man band, in a sense of being a freelancer, but you're actually taking on 3 or 4 jobs, which is more than what a full-timer would potentially do. So then you're kind of working day and night potentially to cater for these clients. Whereas the other flip side to that as well is kind of differentiating, how do you want your freelance life to be? Like, are you a freelancer or are you a small business? And if you're a small business, you need to start thinking like a small business and start potentially outsourcing that work, or thinking of the cost benefit of, is it worth taking on this client? Like, is it something that's going to be good for my soul? Is it good for the portfolio? Is it something that's rewarding because, I don't know, I care about that project and it's like an environmental cause and I'm passionate about the environment? There's all these things I think you need to think about as a freelancer when you're saying yes or no to projects and to clients. But the difficult thing is just knowing when to say no and when to say yes.
Is that a gut feeling thing for you then? Now that you've done it for so many years, is that something that you get a feeling about certain clients, or a feeling about whether a project suits you and isn't quite right for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it is definitely a gut feeling and very instinctual on, I think you can spot quite easily after a while red flags with certain projects or clients, just with the language they use and the way they reach out to you and the way they speak to you, and the way they talk about the project, if they're quite experienced with what they want. A clear telltale sign for anyone who's listening who wants to kind of see if there's a client that could be potentially difficult is if a client comes to you and you're kind of listening to a pitch and they're not too sure what they want. That could be down to inexperience or a lack of an ability to communicate what they want. But usually it's a case of it's going to be a difficult project if there's no way to please that client and to get to the nuts and bolts of the finished product.
Well, I think that's especially important in creative fields where there's no actual set definition of 100% of what the project can be, because even if you get the perfect brief as a creative, it's still within your power to build that the way that you see it, the way your mind projects the project, right? It's open to some kind of interpretation because of the nature of the creative work that you do.
Oh, totally. It's so, you think of creativity alone, it's so abstract and so open to interpretation. So to try and whittle down what someone says they want in their mind's eye and putting that down on paper or screen can be quite difficult, but also it can be quite easy if there's a certain formula to these things and you're working with someone who's quite experienced as well, on both sides, the client and the freelancer.
I thought it was interesting how kind of at the start of the freelance journey, it was make sure you say yes to everything to try and build that portfolio and build that evidence of work that you've done. But as you kind of progress down the line, sometimes saying yes almost on a mandatory basis can be quite detrimental sometimes to your career. So I thought it was really important that we got that out there, that sometimes you do have to flip the coin over and say no instead.
Talking about saying no to clients, I think one of the most important things, or what I get asked a lot from the students at the 100K Freelancer Club, especially those in the creative fields like graphic design, video production, and basically any field where there's the possibility of revisions. How do you actually manage that as a freelancer? Because obviously when you're working on a project and you're editing a video, a client can say to you, can you change this? You do it, they send it back to you, can you change this? And they could give you essentially unlimited revisions. They could really push you, really squeeze you. And a lot of businesses are like that, especially if they're working on a small budget and they themselves, like you talked before, don't know what they want. They're going to try and squeeze inexperienced freelancers for every hour for everything they've got. So how did you, at the start, were you struggling with that, with getting overflowed with revisions and people pushing you too far, and if you progressed into being better at managing that? And just overall, what do you think about offering revisions as a freelancer?
Yes, a super important point you brought up, Jacob, because revisions for a freelancer are a blessing and a con, because to talk about almost a bigger topic, which is so important, is how you price your jobs. So to give an example, if a client comes to you and says, I want these visual effects added into this commercial, and there's 7 shots that need to be worked on. And they would essentially just give you the budget and say, look, this is what we have to spend. This is 10 grand. Can you make it work? And here's the deadline. And that's what's called a buyout. So if you're going to be getting revisions that go on for months, but you've in your head budgeted for, that's going to take me about 15 days, you're kind of maybe going over the day rate that you would have charged for that. So revisions could be really tough, especially if you're starting out, because you may feel like it's quite hard to actually lay those ground rules in because you're new to the game. So you might just keep doing revisions to just please the client. But for anyone listening who is a bit further down the line or looking to just kind of hold their own ground, it's really about putting these things in place from the beginning. So before you have an engagement with the client to start the project, I really recommend to, depending on your relationship with them, to either put a contract in place or have a platform like YunoJuno, which have contracts built in, which says an agreed terms and conditions there, which says this is going to be for this amount of days. This is what we expect. This includes 3 revisions, and that's it.
Let's talk about YunoJuno then, seeing as you've just mentioned them there. They are one of the UK's premier freelance platforms and the largest marketplace for elite creatives and tech freelancers. So very much firmly up your street, and that proven in the fact that you won their Top Freelancer of the Year award, I think in 2020 and 2018. So congratulations, Nick, for those awards. A job well done. Yeah, get the applause in there. I'll probably add some like cheering children in the background in post-production on the podcast just to kind of amp it up a little bit more.
Appreciate that.
Obviously, online freelancer platforms and getting clients online is something we've spoken about on the podcast in previous episodes. We haven't really touched too much upon YunoJuno, so I guess if you could just shed a little bit of light on what it's like on that particular platform, because they do things slightly differently at YunoJuno to other places like Upwork and Freelancer.com, and just in general your experiences of picking up clients using online platforms.
Yeah, I've really signed up to almost any platform you can name, probably aside from Fiverr, Upwork, and People Per Hour, the ones that were covered in a previous podcast. I think when it comes to midweight or senior freelancers, you're in a different marketplace completely, and there's certain websites that cater for those kinds of people. And I think YunoJuno for me has really been one of the game changers, where it just offloaded so much of my admin time of having to look for clients, where they have essentially kind of premium clients. Like you get, I think I actually met Adidas through them. I've done jobs for ATP, the Association of Tennis Professionals, and had work shown at the O2 and on TV and things like that, all through this platform. And the great thing is they're all kind of vetted clients and freelancers, like a bit like Fight Club. Like, to get in, there's only a certain amount of people that know about it. It's a bit of a secret. That's why when people say YunoJuno, they're a bit like, what did you say? So YunoJuno are really kind of a premium service, and it's really easy to find work if you're a midweight or senior freelancer, because you essentially have a list of clients there that say, I want this done by this date. Here's the skill set. Here's the potentially the day rate they sometimes put in, the brief, and you're literally good to go. And what's amazing with their platform is they handle all of the contracting. So all of the contracts all set up. And they also have a 14-day payment scheme as well. So no more chasing invoices for any freelancers that are listening.
Sounds good to me. Check out YunoJuno. It sounds like something that's been really beneficial for Nick on his freelance journey, and certainly something that we'll be checking out as well here at the 100k Freelancer Club. Definitely interesting what you said about there being sort of more tailor-made websites for different fields and freelance expertises, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, certainly YunoJuno is one of those which will certainly prick the ears up of a few listeners for sure. With what you do, you're spending a lot of money on equipment. So obviously your computer is a key tool, but so are the editing suites that you use, the software that you buy. How much money do you put into that in terms of reinvestment into your business, in terms of keeping up to date with the latest equipment and keeping on top of the latest trends in software and video editing technology and all the rest of it? Because it's something which you'll probably have to deal with in your freelance area that other people such as myself and Jacob probably won't have to just quite as much.
Yeah, the gear is a really interesting topic now, because as we all know, the phone in your pocket is actually incredible, and there's so much innovation and really cool looking projects that you can do on literally your iPhone or any mobile phone. So depending on the need, it really depends on where your film's going to live. What's really incredible is that when I was starting out doing a lot of social campaigns, so a lot of the work I do is actually kind of Instagram and Facebook campaigns nowadays, because there's just a huge amount of kind of budget and marketing put into these campaigns. And what you sometimes find is they would spend probably about 50 grand on a red camera, which is like a really high-end cinema camera, to then create content that is actually going to be only shown on your phone. And it's quite incredible, someone filming in such a high resolution, but it's only going to be shown on such a tiny display. And for me, it really comes down to, you might have heard the expression, all the gear, no idea. I would much rather, and I'm sure a lot of people agree, I'd rather hire someone who is using something like an iPhone or a low-cost DSLR and knows how to use that inside out, compared to a student using a red camera. So it really does come down to your need, your audience, where your final film is going to live, and how it serves you.
All the gear, no idea sounds like me playing golf, but we'll leave that to one side for the time being.
Literally just about to say that. I was going to say football though, but I thought, no, I'll leave that out. He's had enough today. I got one more question for you on this topic though, Nick. Throughout your freelance career, when you're working on projects and you're looking at other freelancers, do you feel the need to constantly upgrade your gear to stay competitive? And also, do you budget it when you're working with clients? So, for example, do you, for every invoice you take, do you put 10% towards future equipment or 10% towards maintenance of equipment? Or is that something that you just leave down to like pure chance?
Yeah, both really good questions. I think to answer the first question, I would really encourage people to say that if they don't have the initial gear, but they've got a really cool brief coming up and they're like, I want to get this camera, I've got to film in this lens, and I've got to shoot this music video, then you can always just rent the gear out and you can just hire it out for 2 days or however it may take to shoot the video, or even an editing station. For now, people hire out Mac laptops on set and just download all their footage and then edit off that, or any computer. So you can hire the gear just in the meantime, just to kind of get used to it and to buffer that into the cost. So for Jacob's second part of the question, I think that's so important as freelancers that most of us forget when we charge our day rate or project rate to always include all of these things that you typically get when you're a full-time staff member. If you work full-time, you typically get the software. You might get like an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription. You might get insurance with that, sick pay, the technology. You might get a computer with that and a screen. All these things that you are using in your hard drives and SD cards that you mentioned there, Niall, these are things that you need to buffer into your price. And it's super important. And I know so many freelancers that miss this out. And it's something I cover in detail in the course that I've created. And that's something that I would really encourage people to reevaluate everything that just makes up them as a service and as a freelancer.
Yeah, and you know what? It's something that I thought about at the start of the podcast, the difference between freelancer and self-employed. And, the self-employed makes you think of builders and carpenters and mechanics. And I guess taking the mechanic example, they charge for parts and labour. When you take your car into the garage and they fix it, they're not just charging you for the labour of them actually doing the work on the vehicle, they're also charging you for the cost of the parts to get them into the garage and fix them to the car. So it's kind of all in one. It's all in one package, the charge, isn't it? Parts and labour. So I thought that's a really, really good point, actually. I wanted to ask you about Google and Adidas. How does someone who is listening to this podcast end up working for giants in the world of business like Google and Adidas? How does that come about? I know you mentioned YunoJuno a few moments ago, but where does that stem from, and how does someone aspiring to reach that level take the steps to get there?
Yeah, I think it's a dream for a lot of people, right? When you hear these kind of brands to work with them, and I still sometimes can't believe it. Like, I've got an Adidas kind of brand footage in front of me and I'm like cutting it out there to put it out to the world. I think for a lot of people, the good news is there's a lot of ways. And one of them is that now more than ever, it's so much easier, because you might have heard the expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And with many tools like LinkedIn, for example, in a few clicks, you can tell who the head of hiring is at Nike or Google or Adidas. And you can contact the producers there, or the head of post-production, or, the recruiting agents. That's such an easy way. In about 10 minutes, you can just contact someone and send them your latest showreel and say why they should hire you, why they should take you on for a project, and pitch your ideas. That's one really simple way. Another is something I'd encourage freelancers to do, and weirdly not many people seem to do it, is hire a talent agent. So I've got a few kind of talent agents that represent me, and they essentially do all the legwork. Like, when I'm on a project, they will look for the next clients for me and pitch, some projects to me and say, look, do you want to take on this one? If not, we've got this one. So they have the contacts. They've spent years building these relationships with Google, with Adidas, with Estee Lauder. And that's a really quick way to get in as well, without too much effort.
Yeah, and I'm assuming these guys because this is the first time I've ever actually heard of a talent agent for a freelancer, but I'm assuming they operate in a similar kind of way to the freelance marketplaces, where they're going to be taking some sort of commission from those projects, right?
Yeah, it's a good point, because some talent agents will take a fee off of your day rate, and they're very transparent about it. It's not like they just sweep it under your eyes. They'll kind of take a percentage on that day rate or that project rate, and others actually buffer it into their cost. So they'll charge the client that fee on top, so it doesn't take anything off your day rate.
And Nick, just one last question for you before we start to end out the podcast, and that's that I met you here in the wonderful city of Barcelona, friend of a friend, Chris. Shout out to Chris if he's listening. I'll be looking for him to DM me for this shout out. But so you did the same thing as me, right? So you were based in England, and then you just moved to Barcelona. What made you do that? Like, what was in it for you? Like, have you traveled before, and was it just something you're looking for, new experiences? That's why you chose a new location other than England. And two, how did that actually impact your freelance career? Because for me, it actually kind of dented my freelance career, like for maybe say 6 months. When I moved from England to Barcelona, some of my clients are a bit like, yeah, well, am I really going to be able to contact this guy as much? It's going to be difficult to go into like in-person meetings and all that sort of stuff. So it did hinder me a little bit for about 6 months until I was able to, steer it in the right direction again. So just to recap that question, did it impact you at all when you moved, and why did you move?
If I could be totally honest, I love tapas. So I had to get out here. I had to get. I hate the rain. I love the sun. It's cheap beer, cheap tapas. No, I really, just to kind of echo what Jacob said, just kind of, because I know he's a big fan of Barcelona and Spain as well. I love the lifestyle here, and I've always had a dream to work remotely. And I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the term digital nomad. And although I love traveling, and I've been so fortunate, I've had jobs all around the world, really, just kind of like filming gigs and editing gigs. I didn't want to be always on the move, and I wanted a base. So I've always loved Barcelona. And as I set this kind of vision in my head, about 2 years before that, I kind of slowly was getting the idea into my clients' heads of, I could do this remotely, and I could save 2 hours off my commute in London and work those extra 2 hours for you. So I'm giving more output rather. And all from the comfort of my home, with having, kind of less travel time, less time on the tube, and doing more time doing what I love and being creative. So for me, it was actually a really easy transition, because all of my clients, strangely, didn't want to shop around, and I'd say 100% of them stuck with me. There was no one that really said, look, we need you in the office every day, because essentially it didn't make a difference. If anything, I found massive benefits, and I really pitched that to them, because I invested in a new Mac Pro, which cost the same as a Tesla, but it could render things like a Disney film. It's so powerful and fast that my gear was better than the ones that I was going to the studios that I was working at. And I've got all the software and the kind of plugins that I'm so used to. So it was a really easy transition. So to answer Jacob's question, I guess it was more a case of how I transitioned any of the clients to remote working with some amazing platforms I use, which automates my whole workflow essentially, where I would kind of save a film, it would upload it to this really cool website called Frame.io, and they can comment directly on the screen and draw exactly where they want something removed or retouched and taken out. And I get all this feedback in real time. And then I just kind of crack on with the comments again and send it over. And it's like we're in the same room.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really interesting to hear that. Although I am fearful now the next time I'm in Barcelona, I'm going to have to brush up on my Spanish because you guys are going to be chatting away to each other and I'm going to be stood there saying, Tres cervezas, por favor. And that's all I'm going to be able to say.
That's all you need in Spain.
That's all you
An
need.
instant way to get to fluent Spanish is just to drink those free beers. And then you'll be there.
Yeah, definitely. I tell you what, before we let you go, on a podcast recently on the 100K Freelancer Club, we spoke about some of the nightmare situations when it comes to pitching to clients, maybe some of those embarrassing moments that you've had in your freelance career. And you've been freelancing for over a decade now, Nick, so there must be some locked away that you that you didn't really want to share. But as kind of a rite of passage, Jacob said his embarrassing moment. Is there anything that has maybe happened to you that's left you with a bit of a facepalm moment?
Oh,
he's too good. He's got nothing.
Coincidentally, my mind's gone blank. Is that my subconscious trying to protect me from embarrassing stories?
I think so. I think we'll let him get away with it, eh, Jacob?
Yeah, well, maybe we'll have to get you on again in the future just so you can spill the beans, because I don't know if I trust you about this one.
If this gets 100,000 views for the 100K Freelancer Club, I'll come back on and reveal my deepest, darkest secrets.
I wondered what you were going to say. You were going to reveal then. I was like, this is a family podcast, so let's be very careful here. Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Really enjoyed chatting to you and learning the sort of inner workings of what you do and how you do it. Nick's a great guy. I implore you to go and check him out. I also implore you to go and check out YunoJuno as well. If that's something you're interested in, then you can find Nick's services on there as well as on his website.
And I want to jump in as well and say we cannot thank you enough for coming on this podcast, Nick, and sharing your experiences as a freelancer, giving your advice, and just being, a great person to speak to here on the podcast. And I want to tee you up now, and you can jump in and say a load of wonderful things about yourself in the courses that you actually offer, because we know you have some fantastic content over on your website. I've gone through the whole course, Niall's gone through it. We both love it, and we do think it is it's an amazing addition to what we offer here at the 100K Freelancer Club as well. So anybody looking to advance their career as a freelancer, I highly recommend that you go over and check out Nick's content. I'll leave the driver's seat to you now, Nick, so you can just jump in and go crazy and promote everything that you do.
Thanks so much, guys. I'm blushing. Thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm really it's such an honor to be here because, as you know, Jacob, I've been speaking to you for a while now, and I'm such a fan of what you guys are doing at the 100K Freelancer Club. And I kind of binged the podcast, so I was loving it so much.
You must have been bored.
Lockdown time. No, it was really the gym and walking. Everywhere I was going, I kind of wanted to tune into the next episode. So I really love your vision. I genuinely, I wouldn't have come on the podcast if I didn't believe in what you guys were doing. So really, keep it up, guys. And
so then, Nick, where can everybody go to find all this amazing course content, and what is your website?
Yeah, so you could find my film company at nkfilms.co.uk, and I've got the course company NK Courses, which is nkcourses.co.uk, and all the relevant kind of hashtags are pretty much the same. It's NK Courses and at NK Films. And yeah, just to give you a quick kind of background about the courses, I finished my second course, which is all about how to discover and win clients, part of what I call the Freelance Mastery series. So it's perfect if you're a freelancer listening here and you're looking to get into the film game and the video game. I'm using all of my secrets and tips and everything I've learned over 12 years compressed into this course, which is going to be constantly updated. And it also includes a lot of free tools that are to automate your freelancing life and hacks to get around things like kind of pitching to clients, briefing clients, how to price yourself, how to set up your editing projects, and they're all included in the courses.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and we do hope to see you again sometime soon in another episode. And if you're listening to the podcast still, as well as checking out Nick's stuff, you can head over to 100kfreelancerclub.com and sign up for our free audio course, which is going to basically teach you how to ignite your freelance career. And one last time, make sure you go over and check out Nick's stuff, because again, this is the man that's picking up clients like Adidas, Google. So this man really does know his stuff. So we encourage you to go check that out, and we will catch you in the next episode of the 100K Freelance Club podcast.